Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 47. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I know we've taken a little break, so I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, and commented, continues to listen to the old episodes, and supports the show. It allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. I also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength, for bringing you this episode today for free. Cerberus is an organization that truly puts the athlete first and is actively working towards providing the best quality gear at an affordable price. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus has quickly evolved into a global brand symbolizing quality and trust. Their ever-growing product range is used by the top athletes around the world at the highest level of competition, and every Cerberus strength product has been designed with performance in mind with the highest attention to detail. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to receive an extra 10% off your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Guillermo Blanco. Coach Blanco is a tactical strength conditioning coach currently working with the Army's H2F program at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. Prior to his time in the tactical setting, Coach Blanco served multiple roles at McKendree University as the head powerlifting coach, assistant athletic performance coach, as well as an adjunct instructor. In the collegiate setting, he's also been an assistant coach at Aurora University, as well as beginning his coaching career as an intern at the University of Illinois with the football program. In addition to his collegiate experience, Blanco has spent time coaching both at the high school level as well as the private sector at sports performance facilities, including Wheaton-Warrenville, South High School, and Acceleration Sports Performance, respectively, in addition to personal training at various large gyms when first starting his career. As a competitive powerlifter himself, Blanco has been competing in multiple divisions and weight classes, including raw, classic raw, and multiply powerlifting since 2015. He brings his coaching knowledge and personal experience competing to fellow powerlifters as an online powerlifting coach, working with athletes of all levels, weight classes, and disciplines. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Guillermo Blanco. What's going on, everybody? I'm excited today. I am joined by new friend, coach of mine, Guillermo Blanco. How's it going today, man?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited, one, to get to talk to you, but two, this is the first recording, the first podcast from now, like the new house in Florida. So you're the inaugural guest.
Awesome. Excited for that.
Awesome, man. Hey, well, I want to jump right into it. First thing I got to know kind of how you got involved in the strength game, like what sports you played growing up, what got you to powerlifting?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been, kind of in the strength game for 20 or going on 20 years. I first started out like I was 13, 14, whatever middle school age is. That's when I really got into working out. As far as like sports go, really only played soccer growing up for 6-7 years, something like that. And then when I finally got to high school, I was able to play football. And I had to wait until then just because my mom, she was kind of the type like, oh no, you're going to get hurt. Is at that point like, okay, like give it a go. Loved it. I also did track. My first year, I did a little bit of kind of distance-ish. Did an 800 then, didn't like it. So I just stuck to being a thrower. So really those were the only handful of sports that I did growing up. I did have the opportunity to go the Division III route. Football, decided that I really wanted to just focus on school. little bit of the irony to that is if had I gone and played collegiately, I probably wouldn't have ended up in this field, just because some of the schools that I was looking at didn't have exercise science kinesiology. So I really don't know where I'd end up if I went that route. So it's kind of crazy how it all, went about. As far as powerlifting, that I kind of started later on. I'm 31 now. I think my first meet was like 25. So going on 7 years here pretty soon. And I started late just because I was the type that, I wanted to be ready for meet. I was kind of like shy or embarrassed that I like wouldn't do well. So I probably would have ended up starting a couple years earlier, but I kind of held off on that. And throughout the last 6 years or so, I've been pretty heavily involved within that sport and just kind of been able to continue to be competitive, kind of as all of us strength coaches are pretty competitive, and that just kind of keeps me going.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think if it weren't for my training partner, like when I first got started, like involved in strength sports and strongman specifically, I probably would have held out a lot longer. I think people that are kind of in that first novice competition really just want to be prepared, and it's not a bad thing. It's just, I mean, thinking back on now, I don't know if you feel the same way. I wish I would have started even sooner, like not even trained for one, just gone and seen if I like it, because I mean, it would have been a few more years under my belt just to get that feeling. But I mean, it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of felt the same way. Just I definitely would have started at least kind of high school, early years of college. I probably would have started then. But like I said, I was just kind of, in my head of like, oh, I'm not good enough, not strong enough. And, maybe people have heard this, but anytime someone finds out it's your first meet, regardless of federation, it seems like everyone's pretty friendly and willing to help you out, which is pretty cool. I know that's kind of how I found one of my training partners. It was his first meet too, but there was other people there helping us out and just kind of guiding us along. So that would have been cool to, get more years under my belt too. But, it is what it is.
Yeah, the strength community is pretty awesome in regards to that. And it's definitely one thing that I love to, like, when I'm talking to people about bringing them in for a different sport and everything, I think they're nervous about it. Either one, they're super competitive and don't know how they're going to stack up, or they feel like everyone's going to be against them. But it's the complete opposite. And people are, for the most part, are really willing to help newcomers in. I mean, people that have been in it forever. It's an awesome kind of community to be a part of. Hey, you talked about it a little bit, like not knowing, like going the D3 route and playing football, and you kind of switched getting involved in college. Did you originally want to be a strength coach, or did you even know like the exercise science like field before you actually got into it? And then what's kind of propelled you to the coaching route?
Yeah. So, I my undergrad degree was in kinesiology, and how that came about was my junior year of high school. Ended up getting hurt, sprained my MCL, saw the orthopedic doctor. He kind of helped me out, and that's kind of where I first wanted to start out. Obviously, freshman year, did some of the pre-med classes, and I was like, this isn't for me. Like, I'm not doing this, because I want to be sports medicine doctor. And I was just like, no, I'm not cut out for it. And then like everyone else within that major, at least within my program, everyone was going the physical therapy route. So naturally I went that route. Did all the volunteer experience that you needed to go to for grad school and all that, 3 different settings. And again, it was just like, hey, this isn't for me. This seems I don't know, just not my cup of tea, I guess. And then at that time, I was actually a football student equipment manager. So I was working with the football team at University of Illinois, and I knew the strength coach there. Obviously, everyone on staff kind of knows who you are. And, I talked to him a little bit and got the opportunity to intern with him for a year. Just kind of thrown into the fire, was able to, kind of work with some of the players. And really within like the first month, I was like, man, this is something I want to do. And just kind of since then, just kind of obviously grown into a career now. But obviously with strength training and all that, always had a passion for it. And, I'd hate to be one of those guys, but, we're all meatheads at heart, I guess. So, I mean, that's part of why, we wanted to be coaches. And obviously as my career's developed, just looking back at some of the coaching I had, as far as like strength training, you're like, oh, that was probably not the best, best coaching, I guess. So in return, just want to be able to provide the best coaching, especially when it comes to, just strength conditioning, strength sports, all that. So
That's great. Yeah, I know. I wouldn't say you bounced around a lot, but you did get a lot of broad experience, like from the course of your career. And obviously now, like you're in a different setting than you've actually ever worked in, being a tactical strength coach now. Like kind of going on all that experience, like what would you suggest for younger coaches? Like, would you suggest like, I mean, everyone's route is completely different. Like even if you put mine and yours like side by side, and we're similar places in our career, like actually graduated at the exact same time. So, but we took completely different routes. Like as a young coach, do you think it's more beneficial to like really get an expansive background and pursue a bunch of different places, different settings before you actually kind of hone in on one avenue? Or have you found that like you going and being in like all the divisions, being a personal trainer at one point, being in the tactical setting now and high school setting, like that's actually benefit you as a coach?
yeah, I think so. I mean, it's definitely given me more of a broader experience than most coaches. It seems like, when you're young and you want to say, hey, like I want to be a strength conditioning coach, whether it be high school setting, private sector, collegiate, whatever, you're kind of honed in on that. But I do think that each setting does allow you to kind of grow as a coach and learn so many things that you may not have learned if you weren't in it. As far as like the tactical side of, I really never thought of myself going into it. It just kind of happened that way. But I am kind of fortunate to have those experiences throughout my career and kind of taken me where I am now.
Yeah, I know you talked about the physical therapy route, and like I think for most people that don't know, you have to get all these kind of, I wouldn't say they're not site visits, they're more kind of structured shadow hours, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I forget what the hours were required for like PT school, but it was a ridiculous amount. And just like you said, different environments, like you had the clinical and like non-clinical. So I was at the hospital and like an Athletico and I forget what else, but it still got to allow me to see different perspectives and kind of choose like which route I wanted to go. But, kind of, parallel to strength conditioning, like me being in different settings really allowed me to decide which setting I wanted to be kind of long term. So
No, I think that's great. And I think that's good advice. And that's a good kind of jumping off point for anybody that is considering being a coach. Because I think I've had interns in the past. I've fellow people that I started off with. I think they honed in, like you said, on either the one place or one setting they wanted to be in, and didn't actually realize that there were different opportunities. Like they started in the collegiate setting, but didn't realize that they could be a high school strength coach or a tactical one. And I know now more stuff is just popping up. You could be in the clinical setting. You could be, I mean, working in the private sector. You could be a personal trainer. There's a lot of different avenues, but I hope one day like sports performance and like strength and conditioning and all those exercise science kinese programs actually take a page out of the physical therapy like manual and start almost requiring people to go observe these different settings, so people don't start down a profession they don't really want to be part of, and they can actually kind of see what the other side of the coaching realm is doing in those different settings. So I mean, I think you got a lot of great experience, and it's set you up for the position you are in next and that you are in now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I 100% agree. I didn't even really think of it that way of, programs starting to make those requirements. Hopefully, maybe once accreditation goes through, I think it's like 2030 or whatever through the NSCA, that maybe they start something like that. Because I feel like, a lot of coaches early off in their career, they might do a couple of internships in the collegiate setting or private sector or whatever, and they might do it for a year or two or whatever, and then they're just like, oh, either kind of give up or decide that it's not for them. Well, I think if they're during their undergrad career, they have something like that, then maybe it'll allow them to see those different avenues and kind of decide from there. And then maybe, post graduation, they go into a different setting and that they like. It'll allow them, kind of give them a better idea of what direction they want to go to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that's a great approach to take it. I tried to do that with my undergrad, but I think at that point I already knew like I wanted to be in college, and my whole point was just to go to see other different universities and see them at different settings to really hone in on what level or what sports or where I really wanted to like kind of make your impact. And I think for coaches, being able to find that setting first, because if you want to be a coach, you want to be a coach. It's really just finding like where your expertise is and where your kind of personal approach wants to be. And I think that's a good idea to kind of start. I know you're just pretty fresh, new into the tactical setting, so we can keep it pretty general. But what would you say like are some of the biggest things that you've learned thus far, like being a tactical strength coach in your short time, that's maybe different from all the other experiences and all the different background that you've been in as a coach previously?
I would say learning to work with kind of what you have, unlike the collegiate side, some weight rooms that I've worked in, they may not have had certain pieces of equipment, so you had to get creative. But here it's just like working with minimal stuff. We have these boxes, so to speak, with just equipment, and we're training outdoors for the most part. Kind of the basics: trap bars, a couple of benches, barbells, kettlebells. So you kind of have to make do with what you have, with the size of soldiers that you're working with. So it's learning to be creative, and it's not necessarily optimal in terms of how things flow, but it's more about efficiency and just organization. Fortunately, I've had the experience where I've had to work with like multiple groups at a time. So just kind of having that controlled chaos, so to speak, is kind of second nature to me. So it's not anything it's difficult, but just kind of navigating through that. But the biggest thing is just creating buy-in, developing that culture. I know that's pretty cliche of a strength coach to say, but it's even more true in this setting, at least where I'm at, because the whole program's new to everybody, and you're trying to get them on board and understand why they're doing what they're doing, and really getting them to understand, kind of the whys and hows. So.
Yeah, I think the military population, working with them, they're just coming from a completely different like mind frame, and you're working with different athletes that compared to like high school or collegiate, where they're kind of doing it for fun, essentially. Like we can say, like, some people like to say coaching is life and death, and like this game is all on the line, but it's completely different when that end goal is actually true. So I know, like, I mean, you're working with the Army, and so they have their own kind of culture built in to like the big Army and what they do for work. So how do you try to tie in like some of the cultural things that they preach, or like maybe the structure or anything, into your training, or like are they kind of mutually exclusive for how you're working with them? If that makes sense.
Trying to think. I mean, I guess they're a little different, but you just kind of work with, what they've been doing and kind of what's worked and what hasn't. But again, it's just the biggest piece is just education. Like I said, it's getting them to understand what you're trying to accomplish with them, at least from a physical standpoint. Because there's different realms as a part of this program that they're doing. But hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if that quite directly answered your question.
No, that's fine. That makes sense to me. I mean, I think that's a tie-in too from what we've worked in the past with the college and high school athletes. It really comes down to education. And I think most of them are going to come in with a culture of their own, and it's led by the head coach, or it's led by the team. And I think I'd like to assume that tactical setting is the same way, like how it comes down from the leader, how it comes down from the higher ups is kind of dictate the culture. And then you kind of have big rocks to work with of how to kind of mold that culture into what you want to see in the training room, and what you want to see like performance wise. And I think that I'd like to say they probably balance off each other pretty well.
Oh yeah. I mean, a lot of people think, tactical side, is just completely different from the collegiate side, but there's definitely a lot of parallels, at least from the experiences that I've had in the collegiate setting. Specifically at the Division II, Division III level, you're getting a lot of athletes that you work with that really have no training age. They're kind of fresh. Maybe they didn't do anything in high school. If they did, it wasn't anything serious, outside of the, football players. Obviously that's like the one sport that strength and conditioning is kind of a big thing in the high school setting. But anyway, as far as like the soldiers I work with, a lot of them don't have like a big training age, or maybe they didn't do athletics, when they were younger. So it's not too different from that. And it's just getting them to like understand, again, doing what they're doing, why they're doing it, educating them. And then just kind of working with coaches. Here you're working kind of with upper soldiers, kind of higher ups, and just kind of, explaining to them like what your goal is with them. So it's pretty cool that, like I said, having that experience has really helped me out kind of where I'm at right now with the program.
Awesome. Yeah, no. So you have a pretty extensive like background, obviously coaching, and then now powerlifting experience. I know you kind of have to play around with what you have access to. I'm really familiar with with whatever comes in those boxes of whatever toys that they actually get to train with, and everything's outside. And you come to realize real quick that those bars don't spin very well after a while. Sand gets into everything. Everything's pretty rusted over. So it is what it is when you open that container. But with your experience and your background in coaching and powerlifting, do you go about teaching like these movements any differently to now your soldiers versus how you were teaching them in the collegiate setting? Or are there any like big differences that you kind of see from the two?
As far as like teaching the movements they're not too different. I mean, I pretty much teach them the same way. Because like I mentioned, there's trap bars, so I teach that the same as I would the collegiate side. We hardly bench, but I still teach it how I would normally teach it in the collegiate setting. And then as far as like the squat, that's a little bit more regressed. So you're almost like kind of starting from scratch, just making sure everyone's moving well before you actually load them up. So as far as like a back squat, that we're not there yet. It's nothing but goblet squats and landmine squats. My goal eventually would be to, get them to a back squat just to, be able to load them up a little bit more, but, starting small here. So.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think as I've gone through my career more and more, I'm starting to see at different schools, different universities, even different sports, I'm starting to see like where we start off with the incoming athletes is almost having to be regressed even more. Like just the training age and what they're prepared for coming in, like typical to what I feel like I used to see when I first started was different. And I don't know if it's a different coaching approach and me just trying to like have more tools rather than just jump the gun and get them right to the end point a little bit quicker. But it's for most people, I don't think they realize that you're dealing with the same thing on the tactical side, because it's the same group of kids that you're dealing with essentially. I mean, some of them aren't kids, but the same ones that might not be going to college are now in the military and about the same age. So the same background is what you're essentially dealing with. Since you actually worked in the high school setting, and you worked in some of those sports performance places where there are a lot of high school athletes, like, do you see like a trend or something that's really missing in the high school like realm that is probably affecting what we see with these incoming like college athletes, and then what you're seeing from like first year soldiers?
I would say like at least on the high school side of things, I mean, it would be nice to have like some form of formal strength conditioning at that setting. Obviously not everyone is going to have access to that. That way these athletes that do go play at the next level, they're more well prepared. But even then, like maybe for those who don't have access to it at their high school specifically, they might go to like a private facility and kind of do their thing. Where regardless if it was high school or private sector, there are some coaches that might not be the best qualified. And so like they're going to these private facilities and, maybe what they need to be doing isn't the best thing, but that's not to, dig at those coaches. It's more just like, just athletes in general are underprepared. And that might be the same case here. It's like, maybe there's a better form of prerequisite, physically, to where that they do come into this setting and are more well prepared. But as a coach, it's just our job to get them prepared to do what they need to do, regardless of athletes or military. It's you know work with what you got and kind of run with it. So, do we all want the, stud athletes that we want to work with? Yeah, but we're working with athletes who just may never touch the barbell. And for me, like I feel like that's almost more fun and a bigger challenge for me, honestly. So
Yeah, I mean, it's our job to kind of meet them where they're at and be creative with what we have. But I've said the same thing, I think, to recruits a lot of times, and I've said it to friends that are, or like family members that have someone that either is in college or looking to go from high school play collegiate sports. It's like, honestly, I'd rather have a freshman or an incoming athlete that's completely green rather than someone that's been doing stuff wrong for multiple years, because then you have to completely detrain them, like make them learn the other way, and then it's wasted time, rather than have someone that just is none the wiser, that you get to really train from fresh from the get-go, and now they know everything that they're supposed to know, like the first time, rather than learn it a second time. Right.
Yeah, it's a lot easier, and it's just correcting those movement patterns and whatever else they may have going on. It's a lot easier when you're kind of starting from scratch.
For sure. Hey, I wanted to circle back to what you kind of talked about with the powerlifting community. Obviously, like kind of first starting off into it, like the atmosphere and like just the camaraderie that you kind of get with those strength sports. I know you've been involved in multiple different divisions of powerlifting and in federations as well. Even though like powerlifting, strongman, weightlifting, all those things are individual sports, like there's a lot of community built in. And I know in your previous job at McKendree, like you, as being the head powerlifting coach, like you have a sport, like you have a collegiate sport where athletes are coming to train. Like what are some of like the benefits that you've seen as powerlifters or strength athletes training as a crew or a team, what are the benefits you see of that over someone individually training? And then like for those athletes as well as yourself, like I'm not sure if you have trained with a team before or if you've trained individually and you've seen yourself some of those differences as well.
Yeah, so as far as McKendree, I mean, I would say the former athletes that I worked with, they definitely had the opportunity to get a lot better just being surrounded by a bunch of people to push them to get better. Because if they were to train on their own, I think they may not be as successful. You're always having someone to help kind of spot load, push you, because that's the one thing that's going to get you better. As far as my experience, I've always improved the most when I've had a crew around me, and that's kind of how I got started. Initially was by myself, but numbers started flying up as soon as I got with an experienced crew and kind of helping me along the way with my career, within powerlifting. And I've had multiple crews that I've been fortunate enough to work with and learn from, and kind of taking those experiences with what I've done the last couple of years. Now that I've gotten into multiply, you kind of mentioned, different divisions. I started out as a raw lifter, then added some wraps in, and now starting to get into equipment. It's a lot harder to do things by yourself. Getting into a squat suit or bench shirt by yourself, it's not the easiest thing to do. And sometimes trying to do it by yourself is probably not the smartest thing to do, because you're definitely going to need all the help you can get. It's just, for me, I didn't have the luck to have the career that I had back in Chicago. That's where I'm originally from. Down in St. Louis, the last 3 years, there were, multiply powerlifting wasn't like a huge thing in that area. So it's kind of hard to get things going. And then now kind of where I'm at, again, still not a big thing. So it's tough. I just kind of make do with what I have, and you know, hoping to get a crew of some sort started down here.
There you go. Yeah, I know. It's I've been training by myself for so long, and having my training partners like scattered across the country is always difficult. But now being like in the Jacksonville area, Florida, not North Carolina, but because I've lived in both of them now, which is confusing enough to people I know. But now trying to find places in the area that I can actually go to and be a part of a team, even if it's only like on the weekends every once in a while, to at least go use the equipment and be surrounded by some people. And I think strength sport athletes like kind of miss that. There's a convenience that comes to being able to train by yourself, but then there's a difference in the training environment when you surround yourself by people that are all kind of pushing in the right direction, that embrace what you're doing and training. And obviously, like for multiply or for some of the events I'm doing, it's nice to have someone help load, set it up, spot, get your squat suit on, all those sort of things that don't come if you're going to train by yourself. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, even obviously not just from like that physical side, but that mental side of things. Like I couldn't tell you how many times, like, just from a mental side, like just having someone spot you, like that makes a world of difference. Even if it's something that you can do, um, like that bar just might move a little bit faster, if you got someone behind your back, or, spotting you on bench or whatever. So it just gives you a little bit more, just safer feeling, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, those intangibles, I don't think you can really quantify them, but I know for sure I squat faster when someone's watching. I feel a little bit more confident when my training partner's there and I have a spot or something like that. And then you don't know, like you don't really know if you're gonna get out of some of those lifts like without some serious damage. And I joke with people when I go train by myself and then my girlfriend, like if I'm not back in 5 hours, I'm probably laying in my storage unit, unable to move. So, and it's a joke, but it's probably pretty true as well.
Yeah.
So it makes the training experience so much more different. And it's hard to really not justify, but like really weigh how much of a benefit it is. But I know it is for sure a huge benefit when it comes down to it.
Oh yeah. And obviously the more the better, um, you, if I had at least one person to work with, like currently, I'd be all right. But the more the better. Just you're going to be able to get those people to push you and help you out, and things are going to be a lot easier. So
For sure. Hey, so I know not to harp on your last position, but it was a unique one where you were both a sports performance coach working with the varsity athletes, like traditional team sports, but you were also the head powerlifting coach. Um, like, can you kind of touch on one, kind of how that was structured? Because I want to show people that there is still an opportunity to be a collegiate athlete and get scholarships and stuff as a strength sport, especially in powerlifting too. Like, how are those two different? Like, either from your coaching side of it, and then how can people that are kind of more interested in maybe pursuing powerlifting in the collegiate side get involved?
yeah, so it was definitely different. It's one of those unique positions where got to do best of both worlds. Um, being that strength conditioning kind of was my career, and powerlifting was for me, it's just kind of a hobby. Um, but to be able to do both is very unique. Um, there's definitely a lot to manage from both coaching side of things. From the sport performance side of things, I think I had like 6 teams, 7 teams, excluding powerlifting. So worked with track and field, lacrosse, cross country, golf, tennis, And before I left, I picked up women's hockey as well, and then assisted with other teams here and there. So it's definitely a lot in terms of workload, just managing all those teams. But then throw powerlifting in the mix, it's a little bit more specific. As far as like the other teams, like you can kind of have more of like a general plan for each one of them versus powerlifting is a little bit more specific. I've had to individualize quite a handful of programs, and I had 20 lifters, both with the men's and the women's teams. So just trying to manage them. As far as like getting involved, do you mean like high school athlete looking to pursue collegiate and side of things and compete competitively that way?
Yeah. Because I think there's more opportunities probably for athletes to actually get into that realm rather than coaches. I think coaches kind of naturally find that if they want to work at a school. Like I don't know very many like of the powerlifting ones, but I know like a few, even like one close to you, Lenore Ryan, like has a weightlifting one as well. But more so, how can high school athletes kind of find these opportunities to be like maybe get scholarships or have some of their schooling kind of paid for, at least be on a team?
Yeah. Well, there's very few schools that have programs. I think when I started, we were actually the first program that had a collegiate varsity program and kind of offered scholarships, and it kind of rolled from there. I think that started in 2014, and I got there in 2018. So there's already been a handful of coaches before I got there. But since I took that job 3 years ago and before I left, there was like 4 or 5 schools that added programs. So it's definitely growing. I think schools are starting to realize that, hey, like this might be an easy way to add, kind of a sport without having to spend a whole lot of money and put into it. But at the same time, like I think on the flip side, it's like, well, you do need to put a little bit of money and invest a little bit into it. Because you got to travel and whatnot. But as far as like finding programs, that it's simple. There's no like football, for example, has like huddle and like different programs where like you can like put your film out there and get recruited and whatnot. Just I would say for kids, just like Google programs. I can list a few off here. Obviously, McKendree was one. Ottawa University out in Kansas, William Jewell out near Kansas City as well. You mentioned Lenore Ryan. They actually just added a powerlifting program. I don't know if that's set to start this year or next year with Travis Mash. The majority of them are in the Midwest. So I know there's a couple like obviously here out in North Carolina and then one in Mississippi. But just get your name out there. But it is pretty cool because you look at schools or states, I should say, like Texas. Powerlifting is huge in Texas at the high school level, and a lot of those kids don't end up, pursuing powerlifting, even if it's just like at a club level. If they go to college, it's an avenue to get more kids out there. So hopefully once schools start to add more and more programs, I think it'll be a little bit more prevalent from, of like, oh, hey, I can go to college and get a scholarship for powerlifting, because it's definitely, a good sport to get into, because I feel like there's how many kids like are involved in sports, but they may not be the best athlete, but in the weight room, they're a stud. So, it's like, hey, learning about, competing in powerlifting might be a good avenue to, go to the next level and kind of do their thing. So, I know Elite FTS had just kind of a highlight on all the different programs, but it's pretty simple. Just there's no like set website or anything like that to kind of get your name out there and look into programs. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I just know that it's starting to pop up a little bit more and more. Obviously, kind of in our community, we see it happen. Like we see them actually. We Most of us probably even know some of the coaches that are starting those programs up, like the one you mentioned with Travis Mash, and that's where I saw like the weightlifting one. I didn't even know powerlifting was becoming a program with them as well, but like outside of our community, you don't really see it that often. And it's nice to know that there is an avenue for those kids that have played team sports all their life and don't understand that there is like the weight room kind of warriors that are on the teams that might not be good at their sport have an opportunity to go participate in weightlifting or powerlifting at the collegiate level. They just don't know about it because it's starting to kind of come up. It's the same as coaching, us not knowing that there's an opportunity to like be a collegiate strength coach until you're already like invested in it. So to provide those opportunities, or at least like kind of shed some light on them, I think they're going to start becoming a little bit more prevalent, and you're going to see some more opportunities for kids to go to different schools and be a part of it and be the same as any other team sport that you see, like traditional team sport.
Yeah, even I know weightlifting you mentioned is another one. There's a handful of schools. Uh, Lindenwood is one, Missouri Valley, and then I want to say Northern Michigan. I could be wrong on that one, but those are other programs that actually have like a varsity team. So it's just pretty cool. Like you see the different avenues of strength sports starting to evolve at the collegiate side of things.
That's awesome. Yeah, hopefully that starts to continue to grow and we see some more of those and it branch outside of just the Midwest area a little bit. But hey, so with that kind of powerlifting experience, like you yourself, and then like you mentioned, being involved with teams and then being involved like with the collegiate team at McKendree, like do you see a different like mental approach or like a different kind of team environment since it is an individual sport, but you see like a different team environment that might benefit like they're either their preparation or their strength development or just their approach to competition or training that you think like collegiate athletes or tactical athletes can like take a page out of their book to kind of improve? Is there anything from them, like some of those character traits that you would say could probably help a traditional like sport athlete?
I would say that, as far as like maybe like seeing kind of what's involved, within powerlifting, like, oh, it's not just lifting weights. Like there's so much like kind of ins and outs. Um, the biggest thing, the easiest thing they could take away is like, there's a lot of outside factors that play a huge role into performance. Obviously, we stress these things as strength conditioning coaches to our athletes. Like, hey, you got to make sure you're eating well, like you're eating to perform. You're hydrating, you're sleeping well, because that's going to enhance your recovery. And then obviously any other recovery methodologies to kind of help you feel better. We can harp on that so much, like as coaches, but I think that's the biggest kind of like takeaway. It's like, it's no different from other sports. It's like, you got to do these things to be able to perform at a high level. And if lifting is the sport and is kind of like, hey, your goal is to maximize as much weight as possible. Well, obviously, like, your traditional athlete, they're not going to try and do that in the weight room, which is fine. But at the same time, if they see that they're not performing well, whether it be in the weight room or on the field or whatever, it's like you need to start to take these things into consideration and really kind of work on those. And same thing with the tactical side is, again, it's coming back to the education side. It's like, hey, you got to take care of these outside factors. Otherwise your performance isn't going to be where it needs to be. So.
No, that's a good point. I think a lot of collegiate athletes sometimes see the weight room as another kind of have to thing. And it's another thing that gets added on their list of things to do on top of school and social life and practice. And I understand that. And I think that's part of my recruiting pitch, that they're not coming here to be weightlifters or to hang out with me in the weight room for all the hours of the day. As much as I enjoy it, I know that for them, a lot of times it's a means to an end, and it's a way for them to improve and enhance what they're doing on the field, and hopefully like prolong some injuries and elongate their career so they can keep playing. So really all I want them to do is kind of respect it and understand that it's a way to kind of facilitate better performance. And I think a lot of times powerlifters do it to like the nth degree, because they see like, if I do this outside factor, it affects what I do in the platform. And that's ultimately what they see as success. And if athletes, like traditional sport athletes, can really see that tie-in, just because it's a longer, like the weight room is a lot farther away from the field sometimes versus training in the platform and competing on the platform, then they'll start to see that how those outside factors really affect what they do on game day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say just kind of another thing to add is just, being able to work around with, if you have an injury. I think, powerlifters are really good, smart ones would learn to work around those injuries, versus I feel like, your traditional athlete, they may not be like, oh, I have a lower body injury, well, I can't do lower body work. Well, what's wrong? It's like, I don't know, like my right leg is bugging me with some, all right, well, use your left leg. Like you can work around it, still get better. If they see more of that from kind of our side, maybe they're more willing to work around some of these things and not be out as long, and just kind of keep them healthy. So.
No, that's a good point. I agree. I mean, it comes sometimes from athletic trainers saying, oh, well, he's got a sprained ankle, so lower body is out of the question. But I'd like to think that the good athletic trainers, and a lot of the ones I've worked with, would be like, okay, you can't use the left ankle, but there's another like 3/4 of the body that you can figure out a way to work with them. So you don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater at that point.
Yep.
That's wild. Hey, so when we're talking, since you are in kind of a new spot, where do you kind of go for, like, one, before like being in the tactical setting, where did you normally go for like continuing education, and kind of what are some of your favorite resources to kind of stay up to date on the coaching side and powerlifting side? And then since you're in a new setting, have you found anything to be kind of helpful learning like the tactical side quickly, or is it really just kind of on the job and talking to some of those soldiers to kind of get more of a feel about what they need to be successful?
Yeah. So the first part, I mean, I'd really just kind of read kind of books, like kind of what's recommended, as far as like most coaches, look at, I'm sitting here at my desk, like, so I got a bunch of books here sitting, like Movement Over Maxes. I got the System, just a bunch of traditional books like that. Simply Faster was a big one as far as like just articles. There's one that I didn't get into yet. I know I need to jump on it even now. Strength Coach Network. There's a lot of great coaches that put excellent content there. So even some of the free stuff I've utilized there. As far as the tactical side of things, it's a mixture of not necessarily like resources like books and stuff, but more just connecting with other coaches who are either already involved in the program that I'm in now, or just different tactical settings, along with just on the job stuff and talking to soldiers and seeing what kind of the things that they have going on and things that worked in the past and what hasn't worked, and kind of going from there. Because, I feel like whatever resources are out there now, I'm not saying like they may be good or bad. I don't know yet because I haven't looked too much just yet. I'm kind of a little over a month into the job, so not quite there yet. But anyway, it's going to be a little bit different. Like everyone's going to have a different situation going on, how to manage things. So a lot of it is going to be learning on the job and seeing what works and what doesn't. So it's kind of a unique situation versus like, I think on the collegiate side, it's a little bit more manageable in terms of resources and implementing those things. Something that I've learned kind of in my coaching career is just because you like a certain way of doing things, whether it's programming, like methods to use, whatever it may be, like may not always apply to your setting. You kind of have to work with what you have and kind of go about that. And that's kind of the same thing on the tactical side. Like, sure, like I like, certain areas of strength conditioning, but I got to learn to work with what I have, and kind of go from there. And maybe, down the road, I can jump in some of those things, but right now I'm just starting to get my feet wet on this side of things and learning all the ins and outs on the military side. So
I like it. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point too. Like context and how you apply some of the things that you're learning is very specific to where you're working with and like what your role is and what you have access to. And I think that's very different from the tactical side versus collegiate side or even sports performance, like where there's a lot of similarities between the two. Like Division I across the board, if you're working with football, like there's not much difference between one football program, D1 versus another one. Like you have the same kind of hour requirements, you have the same coaching requirements, you're training in a facility, even though they're different or what you have access resources are a little bit different, but it's completely different on the tactical side. Like from branch to branch, from what your contract is, for how many coaches you have, for how many like military personnel, soldiers, Marines, whatever you have, that's completely different. If it's special ops, if they're deployed, like it's not so cut and dry as it is in the collegiate setting or in like just the general population where you're working with people and information is readily available. It's pretty new comparatively to like collegiate side or even anything else. So it seems like it's a more learn on the fly sort of thing. And if you learn in anything, it has to be applicable to exactly what your job is and what you have access to in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the biggest thing is just adaptability, just being able to adapt to, that setting. And I would just say that in general as a coach, that's the biggest thing you need to have. So
I like it. Awesome. Hey, so like any good training session, we end the show with a good finisher. So we got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and maybe overtime to end it off. So you could take as long as you want, or you can go rapid fire with the questions, but you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. Hey, so first one I got for you, biggest influence in strength and conditioning and biggest influence in powerlifting.
Oof. That's a tough one. Man, put me on the spot here.
You could shoot shotgun approach if you need to, or use a lifeline.
A lifeline. Man, I would just say influences, you know, shout out to my acceleration sports performance group with Mike Nicholas, the Kuhn brothers, and Ryan Gucci. Those were definitely some great colleagues and friends that have kind of pushed me to be a better coach. You know, have been a great resource from time to time throughout my career. You know, obviously we each have our own style of coaching and kind of how we approach things. But at the end of the day, they're probably the ones who've influenced me to, you know, just get better as a coach and grow. Because I think early on in my career, I definitely was kind of stagnant with kind of how I did some things. And, you know, then they came along and allowed me to kind of get better as a coach and in many different ways. So appreciate them for all that. As far as powerlifting, man, that one's probably a little bit harder. You know, I do like more the conjugate style of programming. So obviously, like, you know, any of the guys that came out of West Side have been a big influence, but I still use, you know, a few different other, you know, big powerlifters that I've looked from. As far as my own training groups, you know, each one has had their own styles and been able to kind of piece my own thing and kind of evolve from that. Because again, I'd say each group's background has been different. Each, you know, like if you're saying like Ernie Franz guys versus like West Side guys are night and day difference, but each has their own thing to, like, you can take something from each and kind of make it your own. So I'd say, you know, those have been a big influence on me. So I don't have anyone specific, if that helps.
No, that's good. I mean, we're always stealing from different people, and having a broad background like you do and being involved in so many different places, like you can steal from a lot of people. So that's the best thing you can do. All right, next one I got for you. What can you be found doing when you're not coaching or competing? What are some of your go-to hobbies, maybe even relative to your new location?
So I'm going to be honest here. I didn't have a whole lot of hobbies the last few years just because the nature of my work. I was so overloaded with work. Like, I mean, that's the field, just working so many hours that I just kind of did whatever during my free time if I had any. So I didn't have a whole lot, which is the reason why I left my last job. So now it is my job to try and find some new things to do. I do like to, you know, find different breweries and kind of try different beers. That's always been a favorite, as well as just going to new restaurants and trying different food. I don't know if that's really a hobby, but I'm going to try and expand on things now that I have a lot more free time, figure things out.
I don't know.
As I go.
I like that as a hobby. Those are two good ones.
Exactly. Eating and drinking.
Perfect. Hey, so I don't know if you've given this much thought. Obviously been in a lot of different realms of coaching, but if you actually weren't involved in strength conditioning and coaching, what do you think you would be doing? And if you would have picked a different sport other than powerlifting, what do you think it would have been?
So as far as a different career, I think about this all the time because I'm just like, honestly, what would I do? But I think like I probably would have been like either like a paramedic or a cop. I probably need a little bit more time to like really like think on some of those things, but it's just like, well, I think I would want to do those things. Like other than that, like I know I've had desk jobs before, so if that involves that, I don't want to do that. um, I don't know. I feel like those are the only other two things I would want to do. Um, as far as like a different sport, I mean, one that I haven't already done.
Or if you could have gone pro in one of them.
Uh, honestly, like I obviously definitely don't have the built for it, but just being a thrower, um, that was definitely something that I really enjoyed. And having that experience with, my last two stops working with them, that was always fun just because, I mean, obviously throwers always want to get after it in the weight room, but there's actually more of a transfer there from the weight room to their sport. And then obviously watching the Olympics this year and seeing guys like Krauser just throw those monster numbers is pretty awesome. And it's, they too as well put a ton of work into their craft. And, it's not as taxing on the body compared to some of these other physical sports. I don't think I'd be good at any other sport really. I don't know. That's just me. Not too athletic.
We'll have to get you into a Highland Games or something.
That'd be fun.
It's a lot of fun. I'm gonna come up your way eventually. There's a few competitions on the East Coast in North Carolina that I want to hit up now that I'm over here.
Awesome. Well, let me know. Maybe I'll have to check some of those out.
Yeah, you have to show me some breweries too. So now
For sure.
this one's perfect for the next question too. What's your go-to post-training meal look like, and what music are you listening to on an ideal training day?
Go-to training meal. I would say like usually I don't eat a whole lot of anything like specific. It's just kind of whatever. It's more like on like heavy days on the weekend. But I was training in the mornings at my last stop. So after every training session, I would have like a breakfast burrito. That was something that was kind of my go-to. And then training music, basically anything kind of heavy metal, just kind of get me going. That's really the only thing that kind of allows me to really push the weight that I need to. If it's like a lighter day, I'll listen to whatever, but whatever kind of gets me going that day.
I like it. Hey, last one I got for you for overtime. Either favorite under the bar memory or favorite coaching memory that you've had so far.
That's a tough one. I'll go with favorite coaching memory. That was definitely leading McKendree, the men's team, to a second place finish this past spring at collegiate nationals. That was a big deal. It was kind of showed everything in terms of like all the work that I put into the team, and obviously the lifters put in. Kind of believed in me, believed in the program, and it's definitely headed in the right direction. Because a goal before I left was definitely to win a national championship. Obviously, going to get there, but at the very least, it kind of put the team, the program on the map, and that was kind of something really cool to see kind of come to fruition. Of when I first started, that that's kind of what I had envisioned, and I was pretty darn close to it. So that was my favorite coaching memory.
Awesome. Yeah, well, congrats to you guys and the team. That's a pretty big accomplishment, especially starting off in the few short years. I mean, now the program's only been around for almost 8 years. So to come out that heavy on top, that's awesome to set them up for the future. So, hey, where can people find you if they've got any more questions, if they want to follow up from this conversation? I know you're doing a lot of online programming for powerlifters specifically. Where can they get a hold of you or reach out if there's anything to follow up?
Yeah, I have a few social media handles on Instagram. You can find me at Guillermos68. On Twitter, I'm at Coach G Blanco. And then if you want to follow up with any questions in particular about programming, you can email me. It's gblanco68@gmail.com. And then I believe on the social media pages, I have a link tree. So if you want to fill out a form, have questions about coaching, it's on there as well. So feel free to hit me up.
Awesome. Hey, well, Coach, I appreciate you coming on today. Like I said, the inaugural new podcast in the new area, and congratulations on your new job as well. But I appreciate you taking time out of the day to come on and speak with you. It's good to finally get a hold of you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me. It was an honor. Thanks again.
Of course, Coach. All right, take care.
Thanks, you too.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.